Officer Bradley Haynes raised his weapon before Naomi Carter could even say her name, and the whole parking lot seemed to forget how to breathe. The diner sat off Route 17 like a tired little island of neon and rain, its red sign buzzing above the glass door, its windows fogged from coffee steam and late-night conversations. A semi rolled past on the highway, dragging a curtain of mist behind it, but no one in the lot moved. Not the old man holding a paper cup beside the ice machine. Not the young waitress frozen halfway through taking out the trash. Not the mother pulling her son closer beside a silver minivan. Everyone was looking at the same thing. A white police officer standing with his feet planted wide, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on a black woman in a gray delivery hoodie who had one hand raised and the other moving slowly toward her jacket pocket. "Don't," Haynes barked. Naomi stopped at once. Her fingers opened, empty. Her breathing stayed even, but the cold air made each breath visible, small white clouds breaking apart under the diner lights. "Officer," she said, calm enough that it almost made the moment more frightening. "My credentials are in my front pocket. I am a federal agent." Haynes stared at her for half a second, then gave a short laugh, sharp and ugly, the kind of laugh meant to make a person smaller. "A federal agent," he repeated, as if the words tasted ridiculous in his mouth. Naomi did not look away. Behind him, 20 yards across the lot, a white cargo van idled near the edge of the service road, its engine humming too steadily, its windows too dark for a place where families stopped for pancakes and gas. Naomi's eyes flicked to it once, only once, but Haynes caught the movement and stepped closer. "Eyes on me," he said. "Sir, you need to listen carefully," Naomi replied. "You are interfering with an active FBI operation." That made him smile. Not a real smile. A controlled, polished expression that belonged to a man who had already decided the truth before hearing it. "FBI," he said, lowering his voice just enough for the people nearby to lean in. "You expect me to believe they let women like you carry federal badges?" The words landed colder than the rain. Someone inside the diner whispered something. A phone camera rose behind the glass. Naomi felt the weight of every stare, the old familiar weight that had followed her through airports, office lobbies, courtrooms, and quiet streets where people saw danger before they saw a person. Still, she moved slowly, 2 fingers reaching into her pocket, then pulling out a black leather credential case. She opened it with care and held it where Haynes could see the gold seal, the badge, the name printed beneath it, Special Agent Naomi Carter. For one breath, the lot went completely still. Then Haynes laughed again, louder this time. He stepped forward, took the badge from her hand, glanced at it as if it were a coupon someone had dropped on the sidewalk, and shook his head. "Lady," he said, "I've seen kids buy better badges at a Halloween store." Naomi's face did not change, but something behind her eyes tightened. Not fear, not shame, recognition. The cruel little ritual of being forced to prove what others were allowed to assume. Haynes tossed the credential case onto the hood of her car, where it slid across the wet paint and stopped beneath a trembling stripe of neon light. "Turn around," he ordered. Naomi did not move. Her gaze shifted past him again, toward the white van. A small hand had appeared against the rear window, pale under the tinted glass, fingers pressing hard, then folding down one by one into the silent signal Naomi had been trained to recognize. "Help!" The van's brake lights flashed. Its tires began to roll. Naomi's voice dropped, steady and urgent. "Officer Haynes, there is a child in that van." Haynes narrowed his eyes. "Now you're inventing kidnapped kids?" Naomi held his stare, the rain collecting on her lashes, the badge lying forgotten behind him, the child slipping farther away with every second. "No," she said quietly. "I'm trying to save one." Naomi Carter had learned long ago that panic was a luxury some people were never allowed to show. Her mother had taught her that in Atlanta, in a narrow brick apartment where the summer heat pressed against the windows and police sirens stitched the night together, you breathe first, her mother used to say, standing over a kitchen sink full of dishes after a 12-hour hospital shift. You think second. You speak third, because the world will judge your tone before it hears your truth. Naomi had hated those words as a girl. They sounded unfair because they were. But fairness had never been the same thing as survival. Years later, in federal training, when instructors tested recruits under pressure, when alarms blared and commands crossed over each other, and every second mattered, Naomi already knew how to keep her hands steady. She had practiced it in grocery stores when security followed her from aisle to aisle. She had practiced it in college lecture halls when classmates looked surprised that she had the highest score. She had practiced it at her younger brother Caleb's memorial, standing beside a closed casket while officials called his death a tragic misunderstanding, and her mother held herself upright by gripping Naomi's hand so tightly it left marks. Caleb had been 19, gentle, funny, always carrying a sketchbook and a pack of spearmint gum. He had been stopped one night walking home from a corner store because someone said he matched a vague description. By morning, every news station in the city had turned him into a debate instead of a son. Naomi never forgot the way people argued about him without knowing how he laughed, how he hummed when he drew, how he saved every dollar to buy their mother a better car. That was when Naomi stopped asking the world to see her pain and started building a life that could force the truth into the record. She joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation not because she hated uniforms, but because she believed a badge should mean responsibility before authority. It should protect the unseen, not intimidate them. It should make a frightened child safer, not make a grown man feel taller. Tonight, in the diner parking lot off Route 17, all of that training narrowed into one cold line of rainwater running down her temple. She was not supposed to look like an agent. That was the point. The gray delivery hoodie, the plain black sedan, the paper bag with a fake restaurant receipt on the passenger seat, all of it belonged to a cover identity built over 3 careful weeks. The white cargo van had appeared on surveillance near 2 elementary schools, one motel outside Richmond, and a rest stop where a missing girl's backpack was found behind a vending machine. Naomi and Agent Daniel Mercer had tracked the van across county lines, waiting for the right moment to move without risking the child inside. Mercer was supposed to be 2 blocks away, watching the north exit. Local police had been told only to keep distance unless federal agents requested support. But Officer Bradley Haynes had not kept distance. He had answered a vague call from someone inside the diner who reported a suspicious black woman standing near parked cars and looking at traffic. That was all it took. No weapon, no threat, no crime. Just suspicion wearing the shape of a black woman who did not look nervous enough to satisfy him. Naomi kept her eyes on Haynes, but her mind mapped the van's slow movement behind him. 10 feet. 15. Turning toward the service road. If it reached the highway, Lily Dawson might vanish into another county before backup could close the net. Naomi's credential case lay on the wet hood behind Haynes, its gold seal catching the diner's red light like a small trapped flame. She could feel the eyes on her from behind the glass. She could feel the phone's recording. But none of that mattered as much as the little hand she had seen in the rear window. Help. 3 fingers folding down. A silent message from a child who had no voice loud enough to reach the adults around her. Naomi lowered her chin just slightly, not in surrender, but in focus. "Officer," she said, each word controlled. "You need to call your supervisor and verify my credentials right now." Haynes tilted his head, amused by her calm as if it offended him. "You do not give orders here." Naomi heard the van's tires hiss over the wet pavement. She did not raise her voice. She did not move her hands. She simply looked past his shoulder one last time and said, "Then listen as a man, not as a badge. A little girl is leaving this parking lot, and you are the only thing standing between her and help." For the first time, something flickered in his expression, not belief, not yet, but the brief irritation of a man who sensed the situation slipping beyond the story he had written for it. Officer Bradley Haynes had built his career on the comfort of being obeyed. In the small towns along Route 17, people knew his cruiser before they knew his face, knew the hard angle of his sunglasses, the slow way he stepped out of his car as if the pavement belonged to him. He liked the pause that came when he entered a gas station. He liked the quick straightening of backs, the lowered eyes, the soft yes. Officer from people who had done nothing wrong, but understood that innocence did not always protect them from inconvenience. To Haynes, authority was not something carried carefully. It was something worn like armor, polished by fear. He had been warned before, quietly, officially, and more than once. A complaint from a black college student stopped outside a laundromat. A complaint from a Latino father questioned for 20 minutes outside his own pickup truck. A complaint from a retired teacher who said Haynes spoke to her grandson like a criminal because the boy had been standing near a closed pharmacy after dark. Each complaint had dissolved into paperwork, polite language, and the familiar phrase insufficient evidence. Haynes learned from that. Not humility, permission. He learned that if he kept his voice calm enough and his reports clean enough, the system would round the sharp edges off whatever he had done. That was why, when the call came from Marlene, the night manager at the diner, he did not ask many questions. Suspicious woman. Dark hoodie. Standing near cars. Watching the road. Maybe messing with a vehicle. Marlene had sounded uncertain, almost embarrassed, but Haynes filled in the blanks before she finished speaking. By the time his cruiser turned into the parking lot, he had already made Naomi into the kind of person he expected to find. Not a federal agent. Not a woman on assignment. Not a human being with a reason. A problem. He parked at an angle behind her sedan, lights flashing blue and red across the wet asphalt, and stepped out with his hand already near his duty belt. Naomi had turned slowly, not startled, not guilty, only alert. That calm had bothered him immediately. It was not the calm he respected from judges, lawyers, or men in tailored coats. It was the calm of someone he believed should have been nervous. Now, standing in the rain with her credential case lying on the hood, Haynes felt that same irritation crawl up the back of his neck. She had not begged. She had not trembled. She had not given him the satisfaction of becoming the story he wanted to tell. Worse, she kept speaking as if facts mattered more than his command. "You are not listening," Naomi said, her hands still visible, her voice low and controlled. The white van rolled closer to the service road, its rear tires cutting thin black lines through the puddles. Haynes glanced at it for a fraction of a second, then back at her. "I told you to keep your eyes on me." A child signaled from the back window. Convenient. There is nothing convenient about a missing child. A few feet away, the waitress near the trash bins pressed one hand to her mouth. Inside the diner, more phones rose behind the glass, small glowing rectangles capturing the moment without knowing what it meant. Haynes noticed them and straightened, adjusting his posture into the version of himself that looked best on camera. Controlled, stern, certain. "Ma'am," he said loudly, performing now. "You are being detained because you refused lawful instructions and presented identification that has not been verified." Naomi looked at him, then at the badge case on the hood. "You took my identification before verifying it. Because I decide what gets verified." The sentence left his mouth before caution could soften it. Even he seemed to hear the ugliness in it. Rain ticked against the cruiser roof. The diner sign buzzed and flickered. Naomi's face remained still, but her eyes sharpened. Haynes stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You people always think a title changes what you are." Naomi absorbed the words without flinching. She had heard cleaner insults and crueler ones, but this one had weight because of the uniform behind it. For a second, the parking lot disappeared and she saw Caleb again, standing under a street lamp with a paper bag in his hand, trying to explain himself to people who had already stopped listening. Her throat tightened, but her hand stayed open. "Officer Haynes," she said quietly, "what you just said is going to matter." He smiled. "Only if anyone believes you." Behind him, the van's brake lights brightened. It was about to turn. Naomi knew Agent Daniel Mercer was north of the diner, but she did not know if he could see the van from his position. She needed Haynes to look. Just once. Just long enough to understand that this night was bigger than his pride. "Ask the diner to pull its camera," she said. "Call dispatch. Run my badge number. Check the van's plate. Do any one of those things, and you will know." Haynes stared at her as though reason itself were an insult. "No," he said. "You are going to learn that this road does not belong to you." Naomi's breath came slow through her nose. The badge on the hood glimmered behind him, wet and ignored. The child in the van was moving farther away, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, Naomi understood the most dangerous thing about Bradley Haynes was not that he had power. It was that he believed being wrong would make him smaller than being cruel. Naomi knew the van would reach the service road in less than 10 seconds. She could hear the change in its engine, the low growl turning into a steady pull, the sound of distance beginning before distance itself. Every instinct in her body told her to move, to break past Haynes, to run hard across the wet parking lot, and throw herself into the path of that van before Lily Dawson disappeared into the dark. But instinct was not enough. A sudden movement could turn the whole night into another headline, where people debated her choices instead of asking why no one had listened. So Naomi did the hardest thing first. She stayed still. Her hands remained open where Haynes could see them, palms turned slightly outward, rainwater sliding down her wrists. "Officer Haynes," she said, and this time her voice carried across the parking lot, clear enough for the people behind the diner glass, clear enough for the phone's recording, clear enough for the waitress beside the trash bins to hear every word. "The white cargo van leaving the west exit is connected to a federal missing child investigation. The rear passenger window shows a child giving a distress signal. You need to radio dispatch now and block the exit." Haynes blinked, not because he believed her, but because she had shifted the room without moving. She had stopped speaking to him alone. She was speaking to the record, to the witnesses, to the truth that would exist after his pride finished burning itself out. "Do not try to turn this into a performance," he said. Naomi kept her eyes on him, but her voice sharpened by one careful degree. "License plate begins with Virginia temporary tag 79K, white Ford cargo van. Dent above the left rear wheel. Blue tape on the passenger side mirror. Child inside. Female. Approximately 8 years old." The old man by the ice machine slowly turned his head toward the van. The waitress took one step away from the trash bins, squinting through the rain. Inside the diner, someone said, "There is a kid in there." Haynes heard the shift, the tiny crack in the story he had built. For the first time, the crowd was not looking only at Naomi. They were looking where she had told them to look. The van rolled closer to the edge of the lot. Its tires bumped over a shallow pothole, and through the dark rear glass, the small hand appeared again, flat against the window. The waitress gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. Haynes snapped his head toward her. "Stay out of this." But the words no longer carried the same force. Naomi saw it happen, the moment authority stopped feeling solid and started sounding loud. She took one slow step sideways, not toward Haynes, not toward escape, but just enough to open his line of sight. "Look," she said. "Just look." Haynes did not. His refusal was almost physical, a wall he kept building with his own fear of being wrong. "Stand where you are." "I am standing where I need to be," Naomi answered. The van's front wheels reached the service road. Beyond it, Route 17 stretched black and wet beneath the traffic. Lights, a clean path into the night. Naomi's pulse counted the distance. 1 second, 2, 3. Then she made the decision that separated duty from obedience. She turned her head toward the diner and raised her voice. "Someone call 911 and report a child in the white van. Tell them Special Agent Naomi Carter needs federal backup at Miller's Diner off Route 17. Repeat my name exactly." Haynes moved closer, furious now, not because she had threatened him, but because she had gone around him without lifting a hand. "I told you not to give orders." Naomi looked back at him, rain shining on her face, her expression calm in a way that made his anger look smaller. "Those were not orders," she said. "Those were instructions to save a child." A young man inside the diner pressed his phone to his ear. The waitress reached for her own. The old man stepped toward the edge of the lot and pointed at the van, calling out its plate with a shaking voice. The driver of the van hesitated. Brake lights flashed red across the rain. For one suspended breath, the whole parking lot balanced between cowardice and courage. Naomi did not know whether the driver would stop or run. She did not know whether Mercer had heard the call. She only knew Lily had been seen now. Seen by more than one person. Seen loudly enough that silence could no longer swallow her. Haynes stared at Naomi as if she had stolen something from him. Maybe she had. Not his badge. Not his weapon. Not his authority. She had taken away his ability to pretend this was only about control. And when the van suddenly jerked toward the road, Naomi stepped forward just one measured pace and said the words that would later appear in 3 witness statements, clear as a bell through the rain. "If you stop me, you are helping him leave." Haynes heard Naomi's warning, and for one brief second, the rain seemed louder than his pride. The van was moving now, not fast enough to look desperate, but not slow enough to be innocent. Its rear lights smeared red across the wet pavement as it angled toward Route 17, and every person in the lot seemed to understand at once that something was leaving that should not be allowed to leave. The old man by the ice machine shouted the first 3 numbers of the temporary plate again, his voice cracking under the storm. The waitress stood under the diner awning with her phone pressed to her cheek. repeating Naomi's name to the dispatcher as carefully as if it were a prayer. Inside, faces crowded the windows, pale ovals behind fogged glass and neon reflection. Haynes looked at them, then at Naomi, and his expression hardened into something colder than anger. He was not seeing a child in danger. He was seeing witnesses. He was seeing control slip out of his hands and scatter across the parking lot into phones, voices, plate numbers, and a black woman who had refused to shrink. "Enough," he said. Naomi did not move. "You still have time to do the right thing." That sentence seemed to strike him harder than any accusation could have. Haynes stepped to the hood of her sedan, picked up her credential case, and held it between two fingers as though it were dirty. The gold seal glimmered under the diner's sign, wet and real and impossible to ignore. For half a heartbeat, Naomi thought he might finally read it. Instead, he let it drop onto the pavement. The leather case hit the ground with a soft slap and slid into a shallow puddle. A low sound passed through the crowd, not loud, not organized, just human disappointment escaping all at once. Naomi felt it in her chest, not because of the badge itself. A badge was metal and leather. It could be cleaned. It could be replaced. But what Haynes had thrown down was the truth she had offered him, and he had done it in front of a child fighting to be seen. "On your knees," Haynes ordered. The words cut across the rain. Naomi stared at him, and for the first time that night, the pain in her eyes was visible. Not fear. Pain. The old, exhausted pain of being asked to make herself smaller so someone else could feel safe in his mistake. "Officer Haynes," she said quietly, "this is being recorded." He leaned closer, voice low enough that only she and the nearest phones could catch it. "Then make sure they get my good side." He tried to smile, but it did not hold. Naomi lowered herself slowly, not in defeat, not in shame, but with the careful discipline of a woman who understood that surviving the moment was part of winning the truth. The wet asphalt soaked through the knees of her jeans. Cold rushed up her legs. Her hands remained visible. Her shoulders stayed straight. Behind Haynes, the van's tires reached the service road. The driver paused at the sign, then turned right. Naomi's jaw tightened. Lily was leaving. Agent Daniel Mercer was supposed to be near the north exit, but the service road curved behind a stand of pine trees before it met the highway. If Mercer missed the turn, they might lose precious minutes. "The van is turning east," Naomi called out, her voice strong enough to carry. "White Ford cargo van, Virginia temporary tag, eastbound, toward mile marker 42. Haynes spun back toward her. "Stop talking. A child's life matters more than your embarrassment." The sentence landed clean. Even the rain seemed to hesitate around it. Haynes's face changed. The public mask cracked, and something meaner showed through. "You think a fake title makes you above the law?" he said. Naomi looked past him to the puddle where her badge lay half submerged, its seal flashing each time the diner's sign flickered. "No," she said. "I think the law should be above your ego." A woman near the minivan whispered, "She is right." Someone else said, "That badge looked real." The young man inside the diner spoke louder into his phone, giving the dispatcher the direction of the van. Haynes heard all of it. Every voice became another hand pulling the story away from him. He reached for his radio, and for a hopeful second, Naomi thought he was finally going to call it in. But he only pressed the button and said, "Dispatch, I have one detained female causing a disturbance at Miller's Diner. Possible false federal identification. Send supervisor." Naomi closed her eyes for one breath. When she opened them, they were steady again. The worst part was not that he had doubted her. Doubt could be corrected. The worst part was that he had been given evidence, witnesses, a badge, a plate number, a child's signal, and still chose himself. Then, faint beneath the rain and highway noise, another sound rose from the distance. Tires. Fast. Multiple engines. Haynes noticed it too. His head turned toward the far entrance of the lot, where the red glow of the diner sign stretched across the wet road. Naomi remained on her knees, rain on her face, hands open, badge in the puddle behind him. But her voice, when she spoke, was almost gentle. "That will be them." Haynes looked down at her, confused despite himself. Naomi did not smile. She only said, "I told you this was federal." The sound came first as a tremor under the rain, low and controlled, the kind of engine noise that did not wander into a parking lot by accident. Naomi stayed on her knees, hands open, cold water soaking through the denim at her legs, her badge lying behind Officer Haynes in a puddle that reflected the diner sign in broken red lines. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Even the dispatcher's voice, thin and distant from the waitress's phone, seemed to fade beneath the steady approach of vehicles moving fast across wet pavement. Haynes turned toward the far entrance, shoulders squared, trying to arrange his face into authority before authority arrived wearing someone else's name. Naomi lowered her eyes, not because she was defeated, but because the stillness required something from her. She could feel the old anger waiting at the edge of her ribs, hot and familiar, asking to be used. She did not use it. Anger could make a person loud, but it could not always make a person clear. Her mother's voice rose in memory, quiet as dishwater running in a kitchen sink. You breathe first. You think second. You speak third. Naomi breathed. Rain touched her forehead, slipped along her cheek, gathered at her chin, and fell to the asphalt. Across the lot, the old man by the ice machine had stopped shouting plate numbers. The waitress under the awning had one hand pressed over her heart, her phone still at her ear. The mother by the silver minivan kept her son tucked behind her coat, but the boy peeked around her side, staring at Naomi as if he had never seen someone look so calm while being treated so wrongly. That look reached her more deeply than the cold. It reminded her that children learned from scenes adults wish they could erase. They learned who was believed. They learned who had to kneel. They learned what a uniform could do when no one challenged it. Naomi did not want that boy to remember her fear. She wanted him to remember her spine. Haynes glanced down at her, irritated by her silence now, as if even her quiet refused to obey him properly. You look pretty confident for somebody in trouble, he said. Naomi lifted her face. Her eyes were steady, dark, and tired in a way his words could not touch. I am not the one in trouble. The sentence was not loud. It did not need to be. It moved through the rain softly and settled where everyone could hear it. Haynes's mouth tightened. He looked toward the road again. Headlights swept across the diner windows, bright white through the mist. One black sport utility vehicle turned into the lot, then another behind it, both moving with the clean precision of people who already knew where they were going. No sirens screamed. No chaos followed. Just tires hissing over wet asphalt, doors opening, dark jackets stepping into red neon and rain. Haynes raised one hand slightly, ready to speak first, ready to claim the shape of the story before anyone else could draw it. But Naomi's attention had shifted past him to the service road, to the place where the van had disappeared. She pictured Lily's hand on the glass, those small fingers folding down one by one. Help. Not a word. Not a scream. Just a signal made in silence, trusting that someone outside the window would care enough to understand. For one sharp second, Naomi felt the full weight of the choice she had made. She had let herself be humiliated in public because a frightened child needed time. She had allowed Haynes to mistake restraint for weakness because movement might have cost Lily more than dignity. She had swallowed every insult, every false assumption, every drop of rain running into her collar, because the mission was not to win an argument in a parking lot. The mission was to bring a little girl home. A third set of lights appeared beyond the pines, moving east on the service road. Naomi heard radio chatter from one of the arriving vehicles. Quick and clipped, then the words she needed most, visual on the van. Units are behind it. Her shoulders loosened by a fraction. No one else would have noticed. But she felt it, the first small mercy of the night. Haynes did notice the change in the air, though. He saw the diner crowd lean forward. He saw the agents walking toward him. He saw Naomi still on her knees and somehow no longer beneath him. The rain kept falling, light and steady, polishing the badge in the puddle until the gold seal flashed again. Naomi looked at it, then at Haynes. She did not ask to stand. She did not ask to be believed. She simply waited, calm enough to make the truth arrive on its own feet. The first agent out of the lead sport utility vehicle was Daniel Mercer, tall, rain sliding off the shoulders of his dark federal jacket, one hand lifted in a calm signal to the agents behind him. He did not rush. He did not shout. That was what made the moment feel heavier. His eyes moved once across the parking lot, taking in the diner windows, the phones, the cruiser, the badge in the puddle, and Naomi still kneeling on the wet asphalt with her hands visible. Something changed in his face then, not panic, not surprise, but a controlled kind of fury held behind professionalism. "Officer," Mercer said, his voice carrying cleanly through the rain. "Step away from Special Agent Carter." Haynes turned toward him with the stiff confidence of a man trying to pretend he had not heard the title. "I have a suspect detained for presenting false identification." Mercer looked down at the credential case near Haynes's shoe. He walked over, bent, and picked it up carefully. Water ran from the leather as he opened it. The gold seal caught the light. He read the name, though he did not need to, then held it up for everyone in the lot to see. "This identification is authentic," he said. "This is Special Agent Naomi Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. She is the lead agent on the missing child operation you just interrupted." The words did not explode. They settled. That made them worse for Haynes. The old man by the ice machine lowered his paper cup. The waitress under the awning whispered, "She told him." Inside the diner, someone let out a breath so loud it fogged the glass in front of them. Haynes glanced at Naomi, then back at Mercer. For the first time all night, his certainty looked borrowed. "No one told me there was a federal operation here." Naomi slowly rose only after Mercer gave her a small nod. Her jeans were dark at the knees, her hoodie soaked along the sleeves, but her posture remained straight. She did not reach for the badge. She did not snatch back dignity because she had never given it away. "Local units were instructed to maintain distance," Mercer said. "You were not requested on scene." Haynes's jaw worked as he searched for a version of the facts that would still leave him standing above them. "I received a call about suspicious behavior." Naomi finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the rain. "You received a call about a black woman standing in a parking lot, and you decided that was enough." No one moved. The sentence opened the truth like a door. Haynes looked toward the diner windows and saw every phone still pointed outward. Mercer touched the radio at his shoulder. "Status on the van." Static cracked, then a voice came through. "Federal units have the vehicle stopped near mile marker 42. Child located. Alive and responsive. Emergency medical services requested as precaution. One adult driver in custody." Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. It was not relief exactly. Relief was too light a word. It was the sound of a weight shifting off her chest without fully leaving her body. Lily Dawson had been found. The little hand in the window had reached someone after all. The waitress covered her mouth and started crying silently. The mother by the minivan hugged her son tighter. Even the old man looked up toward the dark service road as if he could see the child being brought back through the rain. Haynes heard the radio too. His face lost color in slow degrees. "I did not know," he said. "You refused to know," Naomi answered. That was when the second twist arrived, quieter than the first, but just as final. A local patrol sedan turned into the lot behind the federal vehicles, followed by a dark blue county sport utility vehicle. Captain Ruth Bennett stepped out beneath a black rain hat, silver hair tucked neatly under the brim, her uniform pressed even in the weather. She took in the scene with the practiced eyes of someone who had spent 26 years reading trouble before anyone explained it. "Who is in charge here?" she asked. Mercer turned. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agent Daniel Mercer. This is Special Agent Naomi Carter." Bennett's eyes moved to Naomi, then to the badge in Mercer's hand, then to Haynes. The silence between her and her officer was colder than the rain. "Bradley," she said slowly. "Tell me you verified her credentials." Haynes opened his mouth, but no answer came. Naomi did not fill the silence for him. She let it stand there, plain and empty, while the diner sign buzzed overhead. Bennett looked toward the waitress. "Did anyone record this?" Nearly every hand behind the glass rose with a phone. The young man inside pushed the diner door open and said, "I recorded from when he laughed at her badge." Another voice added, "I have the part where she described the van." The old man lifted his phone with trembling fingers. I called out the plate. Bennett's expression tightened, not with embarrassment, but with recognition. The truth was no longer dependent on one black woman being believed. It had witnesses now. It had video. It had radio logs. It had a child found exactly where Naomi said she would be. Mercer handed Naomi her credential case. She took it, wiped the water from the seal with her thumb, and looked at Haynes. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a sadness deeper than victory. Haynes stared at the badge as if seeing it for the first time, not the medal, but the person he had chosen not to see. And somewhere beyond the pines, under the flashing lights near mile marker 42, Lily Dawson was being wrapped in a blanket because Naomi Carter had refused to let cruelty become louder than truth. Captain Ruth Bennett did not speak for several seconds, and in that silence Officer Bradley Haynes seemed to shrink inside his own uniform. Rain tapped against the brim of her hat, rolled down the dark blue shoulders of her jacket, and dropped to the pavement between them. She looked at Naomi first, really looked this time, not as a report, not as a disruption, not as the center of a scene someone wanted cleaned up quickly, but as a federal agent standing wet and steady after being doubted in front of strangers. Then Bennett turned to Haynes. "Tell me exactly what happened before I arrived," she said. Haynes swallowed, glancing toward the diner windows where phones still hovered like small, silent witnesses. "I responded to a suspicious person call. She refused instructions. She presented identification that appeared questionable. I acted according to my training." Naomi held her credential case against her side and listened without interrupting. She knew that sentence. It was the old shelter of people who wanted procedure to wash intention clean. Mercer stepped beside her, but she gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Did you verify the identification?" Haynes looked away. There was not time. The waitress under the awning let out a sharp breath. The old man by the ice machine muttered. "She told him about the kid before the van left." Bennett turned slightly. "Sir, I will take your statement in a moment." Then she looked back at Haynes. "Did she tell you there was a child in the van?" Haynes's mouth tightened. "She made claims. Claims that were accurate," Mercer said. His voice stayed level, but each word landed hard. "The child recovered near mile marker 42 has been identified as Lily Dawson. She matches the active missing person bulletin. Special Agent Carter identified the van, the direction of travel, and the distress signal before your officer radioed anything useful." Bennett absorbed that without blinking. The rain seemed softer now, or maybe the parking lot had simply grown quiet enough to hear every drop. Naomi looked toward the service road, where faint lights pulsed beyond the pines. Somewhere out there, paramedics were wrapping Lily in a blanket, asking gentle questions, calling her parents. That mattered more than Haynes's excuses. It had to. Bennett reached for the radio clipped to her shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Captain Bennett. Log my arrival at Miller's Diner. Start internal notification. I need a supervisor from Professional Standards and a county investigator on scene." Haynes turned quickly. "Captain, that is not necessary." Bennett looked at him then, and whatever loyalty he expected to find was not there. "Bradley, you ignored a federal credential, dismissed a missing child report, and detained the lead agent during an active rescue operation. Do not tell me what is necessary." For the first time, his voice lost its sharp edge. "I made a judgment call." Naomi finally stepped forward. Her knees ached from the wet pavement, and her hands were cold, but her voice was clear. "No, you made a person into a threat before you made a call. That is not judgment. That is bias wearing a badge." The words moved through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. No one cheered. No one needed to. Haynes looked at her, and something in his face flickered, not full remorse, not enough, but the first uncomfortable recognition that the story he had told himself was collapsing in public. "I did not know who you were," he said. Naomi's expression softened, but not with forgiveness. With grief. "That was never the question. The question was whether you could listen before you decided I did not belong." Bennett closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if the truth had weight even for the person required to enforce it. Then she removed Haynes's duty weapon from the situation according to department procedure, calm and careful, and instructed another officer to collect his radio. "Officer Bradley Haynes," she said, each word official and heavy. "You are being relieved of duty pending investigation. You are also being detained for obstruction of a federal operation and related civil rights concerns. Place your hands where the responding officers can see them." Haynes stared at her. "Captain." "Now," Bennett said. There was no anger in her tone. That made it final. Two officers moved in and secured him without spectacle, their faces tight with the discomfort of holding accountable someone who had worn the same patch. The metal cuffs closed with a small, dry sound beneath the rain. Haynes looked once toward Naomi, searching perhaps for anger, perhaps for triumph, perhaps for anything that would let him feel like the victim of the moment. She gave him none of it. She only said, "The badge was never the problem. The man trusted to carry one was." Haynes lowered his eyes. Bennett looked toward Naomi. "Agent Carter, I owe you an apology on behalf of this department." Naomi glanced toward the diner, toward the boy still peeking from behind his mother's coat, toward the road where Lily had been found. "Start with the child," she said quietly. "Then start with every report he filed on someone who looked like me." Bennett nodded, and this time the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt like the first honest thing the night had offered. The rain had almost stopped by the time Naomi Carter walked toward the ambulance near the edge of the diner lot. The night no longer felt loud. The flashing lights still moved across the wet pavement, red and blue sliding over puddles, chrome bumpers, diner windows, and the faces of strangers who had watched a woman be doubted and then watched the truth arrive anyway. But the sound had softened. Engines idled lower. Radios murmured instead of cracked. People spoke in careful voices, as if the parking lot had become a place where something fragile was resting. Lily Dawson sat on the back step of the ambulance wrapped in a gray blanket, her small sneakers swinging above the pavement, her hair damp at the ends, her hands curled around a paper cup of warm water. A paramedic stood nearby, gentle and patient. Agent Mercer was speaking with another federal agent a few feet away, but when he saw Naomi approach, he stepped aside without a word. Lily looked up. Her eyes were tired, but clear. For a moment, she studied Naomi's wet hoodie, the badge clipped again at her side, the quiet strength in her face. "You saw me," Lily said. Naomi crouched several feet away so she would not tower over her. The pavement was cold beneath her shoes, and the air smelled of rain, coffee, gasoline, and pine trees. "Yes," Naomi said softly. "I saw you." Lily looked down at the blanket. "I thought nobody would." Naomi felt those words settle somewhere. Deep, beside memories she had carried for years. Caleb on a sidewalk under streetlights. Her mother at the kitchen sink. Her own badge lying in a puddle while a child's hand pressed against dark glass. She did not rush to fill the silence. Some truths needed space before they could breathe. "You did something very brave," Naomi said. "You remembered the signal." Lily nodded once. "My teacher showed us." Naomi smiled faintly. "Your teacher did a good thing." Lily's gaze moved to the badge. "Are you really Federal Bureau of Investigation?" "Yes." "Did it hurt when he did not believe you?" The question was so small and so honest that Naomi looked away for a second, toward the diner sign trembling in the last drops of rain. Across the lot, Officer Haynes was being placed in the back of a patrol vehicle, no longer performing, no longer commanding, just sitting beneath the weight of choices that had finally followed him home. Captain Bennett stood with her notebook open, speaking quietly to witnesses. The young boy near the silver minivan was watching Naomi, his mother's hands resting on his shoulders. The old man by the ice machine had removed his cap and held it against his chest. No one cheered. No one needed to. Naomi turned back to Lily. "Yes," she said. "It hurts." Lily's fingers tightened around the cup. Naomi continued, voice low and steady. "But the truth does not become smaller because someone laughs at it. And people do not become less real because someone refuses to see them." Lily seemed to think about that. Then she reached one hand from beneath the blanket and touched Naomi's sleeve, barely a brush, light as a falling leaf. "Thank you for not leaving." Naomi's throat tightened, but she held the child's gaze. "Thank you for asking for help." Behind them, tires hissed softly as the patrol vehicle carrying Haynes pulled out of the lot. Naomi did not turn to watch it go. She stayed with Lily until the paramedic closed the ambulance doors halfway to keep the warmth inside. When Naomi finally stood, the boy from the minivan approached slowly, holding something in both hands. It was her credential case. Someone had cleaned the leather and wiped the gold seal. "Dry?" "Ma'am," he said, shy but determined. "You dropped this." Naomi accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." The boy looked from the badge to her face. "I want to help people like that someday." Naomi clipped the case back into place, then looked toward the wet road where fear had nearly won and did not. "Then start now," she said. "Believe people when they tell the truth." The boy nodded. Naomi walked toward the federal vehicle waiting near the diner entrance. The clouds were breaking above Route 17, and a thin line of moonlight touched the highway, silver and quiet. Her knees ached. Her sleeves were soaked. Her badge was scratched, but still shining. She opened the car door, paused once, and looked back at the diner, the ambulance, the witnesses, the captain writing down what could no longer be hidden. Then she got in without another word. Justice did not roar behind her. It breathed, steady and alive, in the silence left after the rain.